If you will just forgive me for a moment, I'd like to expand on the flag that you just heard about. A very good friend of mine, and they don't come better than this, sponsored me to be a citizen of the United States in 1985. At that time, he arranged to have a flag flown above the U.S. Capitol. When I became a citizen, he presented that to me, and I have kept it since and have never flown it because I did not want it to get wet or soiled. At Memorial Day this year, I gave it to St. Andrews. And then I told Jerry, and he said I could not have done a finer thing to have it flown. That flag will in fact be posted at the entrance to the Fellowship Hall, and there will be a little plaque at the bottom. And that plaque is the email that Jerry sent to me, thanking me for what I had done, and agreed completely with the fact that it had been given to St. Andrews, which Jerry, whenever he comes down here, attends. So thank you, Jerry. A better friend I couldn't have. This is about my personal journey to St. Andrews. I also subtitled it, "It is the Right Thing to Do." My association with religion actually occurred before I was born. My father grew up in the coal mining community in the Ruhrgebiet of Germany, and he graduated with a medical degree. With great expectations, he started out to do what was the right thing to do: help people with medical problems or concerns, no matter what their background, religion, ethnic origin, sex, political persuasion, mental capacity, and all those things. It just did not matter. Disillusionment set in when he found out that in Germany at that time, in the early 1930s, that your group or subgroup did matter. As an example, Catholics only went to Catholic doctors and Protestants to Protestant doctors. Mistakenly thinking he could ignore this feature of his native society and that it was ingrained, and not being in the world in which he wanted to live, together with our mother, crossed the English Channel, passed the United Kingdom's medical requirements to practice, and settled down to a life in London, specializing in plastic surgery. Church-going now was not and never became part of his life. During these years, he became proficient and could write and speak without a German accent in impeccable English. Here he finally made the decision to go to Africa, something he always dreamed of. So he packed up and took the steamship to Cape Town. After passing the South African medical requirements, he opened a practice in Johannesburg, and in the intervening years produced 3 children, my brother, my sister, and me. But he soon tired of modifying feminine attributes which really had nothing to do with basic health. So with 3 medical degrees, impeccable English, and wanting to be in the bush country, he applied for and got a position in the British Colonial Civil Service as a bush doctor for a fairly meager salary. Making money was secondary to him because now he was in his dream world. And during his tenure in Africa, as part of his obligations, he frequently spent time with missionaries of all persuasions, and he became a much-loved doctor amongst the missions and the African people. Whenever I accompanied him on his visits to remote missions and villages, I constantly heard words of praise for my father from the local people and the missionaries themselves. Probably the best example of what he did was when he took me to a leper colony at a mission station. And on arriving at this shunned area, he walked around without gloves or antibiotic creams or any other precaution, gently took and shook the limbs of these unfortunate people and talked to them. Bear in mind that these people might not have hands or feet, as they had rotted away from the scourge of leprosy which is also contagious. For these people, he was a saint. He was the only one who would personally go to each one, touch them, and offer words of condolences or encouragement. At this, my first visit to the leper colony, he suggested if I did this too, it would mean a lot. Without hesitation, I followed suit. It seemed the right thing to do. Only many years later did I ponder, was this and many other actions by my father similar to those of the Good Samaritan? Our home was in the bush, so we had to go to a British established boarding school located in the center of the country. On my arrival for the first time, one of the questions that was asked was, "What religion are you?" Now, this was a simple formality to determine what size bus or other vehicle was needed to transport students to the various churches in town. The guy before me, Andrew Green, said Church of England. And as I had no church, I also said Church of England. Next question was, what service? I had no idea, so I said what Andrew had said, communion. This, according to Andrew was the early service with no sermon, and we would be done by 9 a.m. This same guy became a best friend of mine, and we did much in the world together. Despite the fact that we lived on different continents, if we ever were in the same country, we arranged to visit each other. We also attended the weddings of the other's children. It was the right thing to do. Arriving at church on the first Sunday, we all had to see the padre, who naturally wanted to know more about us. When the question arose as to whether I had been confirmed, as under Anglican church requirements, one could not take communion without this procedure. I looked anxiously at Andrew, who indicated that I must say no. That week I was assigned to confirmation classes, and at our graduation and after receiving communion on the following Sunday, Padre jokingly asked if I had been christened. I said no. The words that were uttered were not typical of those associated with men of the cloth. I was asked to stay behind, and with my older brother and Andrew as witnesses, I was, in American lingo, baptized. I apparently am one of the few to hold this dubious distinction of being christened after confirmation and after my first communion in the Anglican Church. But it was his duty to forgive. So every Sunday, we Church of Englanders jumped on a bus and went to early morning communion service. Andrew Green, who now lives in Australia, spoke one day and decided that we should ask the Padre if we could become servers or altar boys in the communion ritual, and we would take turns doing it. Padre was delighted, so we learned the drill. It was much more elaborate than here, and we were required to wear black and white smocks and go through the traditional Anglican procedures, one of them being lavabo, the washing of the hands of the Padre. We were also not oblivious to the fact that if there was any wine left over, and it was genuine wine, he dutifully drank the remainder, as it was not permitted to keep the holy wine for another occasion. Or so we were led to believe. We did hear that at the next service, 1 hour later, he would put on a much more spirited performance. During this time, an American evangelist asked if he could come and do a service at our boarding school on Friday evenings. Andrew and I decided to go and see what it was all about. So the next few months we attended and had a great time singing things like "Onward Christian Soldiers" and other lively spiritual songs. We had no idea to which church he belonged, or even if he did have a church. We could care less. But then the human factor intervened, and a parent or parents from some other organized church group raised Cain that some schoolboys were attending a service from some other church than theirs, and they demanded equal time or that the school should cease and desist. We were flabbergasted and now questioned the system. At either church service, we praised the same God, the same Jesus Christ. We listened to the messages of love, compassion, caring, as enunciated by Christ. And nowhere in the New Testament did we hear or read that Christ would favor one sect over the other. Any interest I might have had in becoming a regular church member waned. When I started my mining and engineering career, I, with other young professionals employed by the mining companies in Africa, feeling the need to do something for the African society, became involved in helping missionaries. And for me, it would be following the example of my father. This ultimately led to one of the best achievements, the founding of and running an organization called Mission Medicare. Several of us had become private pilots, and we felt that we could provide the distant rural areas with a doctor once a week, a luxury they rarely had. Such doctors, all donating their time, would examine and prescribe treatment which the mission staff could then follow. One of us pilots would take 3 doctors in our Cessna 206 and drop them off at one mission, then fly to the next, drop off number 2, and to the next, number 3. Then we would fly back to number 1 and begin the process of picking them up in order and fly back to our little Zambian town of Luanshya. It became very sought after by the missions, and many applied to be put on the list, but we only had resources for so much. We flew these missions every weekend, every year. We began it in 1969, and it still operates today. And sadly, I had heard wrenching news just 2 weeks ago that the force and energy behind Mission Medicare, Dr. George Adams, passed away. We were the very best friends. This reestablished my connection with Christian churches, for what we witnessed was absolute dedication by missionaries who had a great love for Jesus and their God, combined with dedication to do his bidding under fairly extreme conditions without ever complaining. This was Christianity at its best, and we were proud to be in a position to help. This was the right thing to do. Nevertheless, I still did not attend services regularly at any church. We learned a lot about people, churches, and faith, and the choices that one has in this world. We got to understand that kindness and caring and practicing these crucial elements of society uplifted our being, and that was much more important than the constant striving for material wealth, and particularly at a level beyond that which is required for a comfortable and happy life. Now, extreme wealth does not automatically make you happy and content, but it does have one big attribute. It allows you to be miserable in comfort. It also made us ponder the fact that the Christian church is the only religion that allows people to choose the manner in which they wish to worship. And there are a multitude of different ways in which it is practiced. And this brings me to St. Andrew. Soon after we arrived in Gulf Shores, Cheryl stated that she felt the need to attend and be a part of a church. We had seen St. Andrews being built and thought maybe we should go there. I, as a Rotary member, had come to know a fellow Rotarian, Robert Warren, and thought he was a cool guy. So this could be a good thing. As I began to attend most every service with my beloved Cheryl, I also began to feel very good about St. Andrew. Here was a church that, in my opinion, not only did the right thing, but did it very well. When the charter members and founders decided that they would form a new church, this small body of devoted Christians had the courage and the faith to build a sanctuary which reflected their obvious personal belief that this was a forever building and that the design would emulate the way Christian churches have been built over 2 centuries. There is a formality here at St. Andrews that I believe is just the right combination of tradition and the more casual world in which we live. This, I believe, is also the right thing to do in any service in which God is praised. This is something I believe and hope will be maintained. Absent is the dogma associated with many churches who require and prescribe do's and don'ts that either appeal or do not appeal to those who worship. But one of the major attractions of this congregation is the tireless and ceaseless energy of so many people. Not only do we admire the Reverend Robert Warren as he endlessly delivers some wonderful sermons, but we are equally swayed by the incredible talents and dedication of Joan Hand, Roger Jones, the St. Andrew Choir, collectively and singularly. The committees who do so much work for so many people and serve as an example and inspiration. And above all, the friendliness is palpable. We also have such wonderful people in our congregation like Linda Chappell, bless her heart, who tirelessly runs the Christian Service Center for no reward, other than I know that she and her fellow volunteers believe it is the right thing to do. It is, as it states, a community church. More recently, I've been given the distinct honor and privilege of reading passages from the Bible, and I was asked to do a reading today. It made me think that for the first time, I now have a home church in which I feel more comfortable than any other. And I can only conclude by saying, thank you, St. Andrew by the Sea, and thanks be to God.